Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. How long does Classic have left? It feels like it's gone by very fast, doesn't it? Well, at least for me it does, and I've pretty much played the game every single day since release where I'm able to. I don't even think that that's an exaggeration. Classic WoW launched on the 26th of August 2019. Here we are early June, coming up to 10 months into Classic and the content it has to offer, and it's safe to say we are for sure considerably past the halfway mark. Players had well-founded concern early on into Classic that content was coming out too fast. Dire Maul was released on the 15th of October 2019, about a month and a half after Classic had launched. For Vanilla, this update was around 3 months post-launch. This one particularly surprised me, as in Classic it takes a very long time to hit 60, and given that many players took as long as 8 days played to hit that big end level, this meant Blizzard would have expected a player to have invested around 4 hours a day for 45 days to hit that benchmark. Seems like a stretch for your average returning player. Regardless, this feverish pace pushed on as we got our honour and ranking system on November 14th, which kind of ended up forcing Blizzard's hand to get Battlegrounds out sooner rather than later as PvP servers tore themselves apart. And the general gist of content coming out is that it's been done in a way that was far faster than it ever was in vanilla. In fact, the only correct patch timing we have so far is the 2-month period from Blackwing Lair to ZG, and looking ahead now, we only have 2 major content patches left. In vanilla, ZG to AQ was 4 months of time, and today we're about 1.5 months into our Phase 4 or ZG patch. Despite all this though, does the content feel overly rushed to you at the present? Do you think the game would have benefited from more closely matching the release schedule of actual vanilla? Because you know what was released 10 months into vanilla? ZG was. I bet you thought we were further ahead of vanilla's timeline than that, right? Well, we certainly were early days, but time has started to catch up a little bit. In fact, the real substantial part of vanilla's total length, which was just over 2 years overall by the way, was everything post AQ. In vanilla, the same amount of time passed between all the content from release up to AQ as passed from patch 1.9 and AQ to the release of TBC, both of those periods being about 30 months in length. I don't think there's too much to look into comparing Classic's timeline to vanilla, other than doing it for interest's sake, but both in release schedule and for Classic itself, it's been entirely different from vanilla. But it's quite interesting to remark that despite AQ being Phase 5 out of a total 6, in vanilla, patch 1.9 and AQ was quite literally the halfway mark. Will it be our halfway mark as well then? No chance, in my opinion, no chance at all. I think we are very close to seeing Phase 5 being announced. I could honestly see it being this reset on Tuesday the 9th, if not the following one on Tuesday 17th of June. And that patch 1.9 itself will be sometime in mid-July, about 1 month after whichever date is announced on. Or even if there's not an announcement and Blizzard just do a post saying date of Phase 5 coming soon, then it'll be a month from whenever that happens. Some people think Blizzard wouldn't release a major patch during the height of summer, but they have done it before and I fully expect them to do it again. So this then brings us the next question, what about Phase 6 then? Well, I think our Phase 5 will be our longest content phase in Classic so far, just as it was in vanilla, as it pretty much has the most content contained in a single patch bar none. And if I'm putting that a ballpark of around 15th July for AQ, and that most servers will have the gates open by the end of July, I can see next happening towards the end of the year. Now, it's important to keep in mind here that Blizzard currently have Shadowlands planned for Q4 this year, as per an announcement made some time ago. Q4 basically means October, November, or December. Most speculation is around late November at the moment, which, sitting here at the start of June whilst the game is still in alpha, makes me extremely concerned as to whether it will be ready for that timescale, given it not only needs to enter beta, but at least have around 1 month pre-patch for hype and for players to just familiarise themselves with the changes, but that's a whole different video right there. What I'm saying is that it makes no sense for Blizzard to compete with their own game in terms of release, and I strongly believe they will have at least 3 to 4 weeks between whenever Nax is out and Shadowlands is out. So that brings us to a kind of awkward position now, doesn't it? If my dates aren't too far off, that is, because by the time Shadowlands is out, we would have had about 4 months of AQ, which is borderline about right, veering on the long side of how long I believe Phase 5 will continue for. Nax is going to be mega hyped, of course, as will Shadowlands. We need a good time frame between those two things happening though. Even as a player, this makes more sense for Blizzard to do. I sure would like some time between them to give me a chance to check both of them out in my own time, instead of having to choose between one or the other. So here's what I think they're going to do. We're going to get Phase 5.5 mid to late October. This will consist of pretty much everything in Phase 6 that is not Naxxramas, the new relics, crafted items, profession stuff, world PvP objectives in Silithus and Eastern Plaguelands, and the Scourge invasions, complete with the new rep rewards from the Argent Dawn and all the hand-ins there and so on. This will go on for a good while longer than it ever did in vanilla, and then Naxxramas will launch mid-December-ish, and it will go on for about a month and a half before a date for TBC is confirmed, which will be around the start of February. Then there will be about a 2-month period between TBC announcement and release, which means I think TBC will be sometime in April 2021. Now, the one thing that's an issue with this timeline is that I think that 3.5 months of just Naxxramas may be on the short end, and that Blizzard will want a classic TBC beta to exist for a good while prior to the release to get hype levels raised, just like they did with Classic. But given what I think it will look like at the moment, that would almost certainly mean Blizzard has to confirm a rough date for TBC before Naxxramas is even out, which I could see them saying TBC spring 2021 for sure, and I do believe that around April 2021 feels like quite a realistic date as for when it could happen. TBC coming out in April also does it at the start of Q2, which I'm not sure how much of a difference that truly makes, but there you go. This would mean Classic would have lasted about 18 months overall. Maybe that does feel a little bit on the short side. Maybe I'm way off. After all, the shortest expansion Blizzard has ever released was Warlords of Draenor, which lasted a total of 22 months. It also doesn't really give you any downtime. It would be as though you get Naxxramas on farm and before you know it, boom, we're straight into TBC. No waiting about or time to chill. Saying all of this, TBC Classic isn't quite your usual expansion because the groundwork is all laid out for Blizzard. They just have to choose in what manner it will be released, choosing a patch mainly and what content phases there should be for TBC. The usual development cycle is all done for them, and they've even mentioned that should Classic continue, as it almost certainly will, I think we can say at this point, they have the ability to make that happen so much easier having now released Classic. On the other hand, part of me feels like TBC could be as late as May or June next year, and that Naxxramas goes on for 5 or 6 months while we all just sit around and watch streams of people playing the beta all day. I can certainly see that happen as well. Let me know what your timeline looks like. The next thing, how is the release for TBC going to be done? So I've talked about this previously in a video, so let's cover that off real quick, as it's very important to get it right, so to speak. So following the survey Blizzard released some time ago, we can see that there is acknowledgement that some players do wish to stay in Classic rather than progress. I was very happy to see this because despite your or my thoughts on why a player would want to stay in Classic, you have to appreciate that some players have waited literally years for Blizzard to run a Classic server, and whatever you think of Blizzard, unlike any private server, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to have legal problems or be randomly shut down. It's as if your time invested into your character is always going to be there, and that makes it a very attractive option for certain players. Even though you can come up with a list of issues with servers in Classic going on forever, you just have to accept that it makes some people happy, and that Classic ending for them after such a short period of time would be very disappointing. So I think there will still be Classic servers alongside TBC. This means that one side of the player base may have to transfer. Now at this point we don't know the details as for TBC's launch. I think character copying to a Classic locked server closes any issues that arise from transfers like server balance name, guild name and so on. However, even given character copies, realms will 100% have to merge, as players remaining in Classic will be in the minority. This is where there is an issue with those remaining in Classic, and I don't really see a clear solution to this. Let me tell you the problem. Number one, if Blizzard carbon copies everything at the moment and ports it to Classic only servers, the population on 90% of the servers will be unplayably low for anything outside of Battlegrounds. Number two, if they allow free transfers and try to balance it, well, I think we've had enough proof of how free transfers go, and there will only probably end up being about 2 to 4 mega servers per region, maybe even with queues again. Option 3, create new servers, copy characters, allow players to pick a server and launch it around the same time as the TBC pre-patch. This means, however, that you have many players from big and small servers with hugely different amounts of wealth entering the economy. Maybe you just have to take a hit on this front though. I'm thinking it'll be something similar to option 2, and it will take months and months for server populations to settle again. As for Classic as it is now, our current servers I think will be progressive and move on to TBC, probably patch 2.43, we will talk about that in the future. Given my earlier timeline, which is why I'm now doubting it a little bit to be honest, the pre-patch for TBC would be at least 2 months ahead of it happening I believe, so February 2021 maybe? The pre-patch would be as it was in vanilla, Shaman gear and raid for Alliance, Paladin gear for Horde, maybe even the XP nerf from 1 to 60, as well as the addition of unlocking the new races early, Draenei for Alliance, Blood Elf for Horde. 2 months in my opinion is a good amount of time for players picking these 2 new classes to get up to speed for launch day. And I think it makes sense for players to be up and at the correct level, perhaps even geared a little bit for when launch day comes, or any re-rollers are going to feel so far behind. Even though, let's be real, TBC launch will probably be a total mess, you would probably be better off chilling on Azure Style during this time. Total side note, top guilds will be after Paladins and Shaman as an absolute priority. Heroism and Salvation, amongst the other buffs, are vital to a well-structured raid in TBC. If these races do release early, expect a serious jump in the number of dungeon boosts at the end of Classic. And that just leaves me with one more point. Gold, gold, gold. What happens at the end of Classic to, say, I don't know, a player who has stockpiled thousands of thorium to prospect for gems, a player that has tens of thousands of raw gold, and a player who has researched the mats ready to level professions or sell profession kits to get as high as they can as soon as possible? How about a player who's set up half a dozen level 35 alts that he's going to profession cap to make Primal Might and Spellcloth? Are some of them okay? Or none of them okay? Given how hard players go in Classic with investments and gold making techniques, should there be an effort into limiting how much is taken into TBC? Or is that just harming some players for what they do for fun? Some people PvP, some people run dungeons or raid, some people make gold for fun. What I think will end up being the bigger deal are the profession alts, more so than Classic. The Alchemy and Tailor alts for Primal Might and Spellcloth will be the real gold printing machines in TBC, as both of those items will overall be in higher demand than Mooncloth and Arcanite bars are currently in Classic, despite their already high demand. As for gold, I think there would be some benefit from limiting what's taken to TBC so we can have a bit more of a progressive marketplace, because every day in Classic, with no way to get rid of gold other than respecs or repairs, your gold is worth a little bit less every day than it was yesterday. And by TBC, I think we can expect the marketplace for certain items to be cornered from day one easily on many large servers. You saw what happened with Black Lotus. If people are coming in with massive amounts of gold, this will happen for sure, but for even more items. So that's it for the talk today. Let me know your thoughts on all this, and I will see you all in the next one. If you like what you see, give the video a like and subscribe, as there'll be plenty more to come. Take care guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.